The Ikhwan Brethren, also Akhwan, was a Wahhabi religious militia made up of traditionally nomadic tribesmen which formed a significant military force of the ruler Ibn Saud and played an important role in establishing him as ruler of most of the Arabian Peninsula in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The Ikhwan first appeared around 1913. They were the product of clergy who aimed to break up the Bedu tribes and settle them around the wells and oases, on the grounds that nomadic life was incompatible with strict conformity with Islam. The newly Islamicized Bedouin would be converted from nomad raiders to soldiers for Islam. The cleric teachers of the Ikhwan were dedicated to their idea of the purification and the unification of Islam, and some of the newly converted Ikhwan rebelled against their emir Ibn Saud, accusing him of religious laxity. After the conquest of the Hejaz in 1924 brought all of the current Saudi state under Ibn Saud's control, the monarch found himself in conflict with elements of the Ikhwan. He crushed the power at the Battle of Sabia in 1929, following which the militia was reorganized into the Saudi Arabian National Guard. Background. According to scholar David Cummins, around 1913, the same time that Ibn Saud regained Al-Hassa, there emerged in obscure circumstances a zealous movement known as the Ikhwan. Wahhabi ulama went out to domesticate nomadic tribesmen, to convert them from idolatry to Islam and to make them soldiers for Saudi expansion. The Ikhwan became zealous religious warriors united and motivated by idealism more than allegiance to Ibn Saud. The result was a rebellion by some of the Ikhwan against their creator, who crushed them and in so doing reasserted dynastic power over the religious mission. The arid, remote region of Najd had been ruled by the House of Saud and religiously dominated by the Islamic revival movement known as Wahhabism since the mid-18th century. Wahhabism was a movement of townspeople, and traditionally thought of the Bedouin nomadic herders as bearers of religious ignorance, jahiliyyah, and thus as raw material for conversion. To remedy this situation, the Bedouin were gathered in agricultural settlements known as hijra, where they were to be taught farming, crafts, trades, and how to be proper Muslims. There were 52 hijra by 1920 and 120 by 1929. Ikhwan were known for wearing white turbans rather than the traditional Arab kufiya, and for covering the faces when they encountered Europeans or Arabs from outside Saudi Arabia. The pacification of the tribesmen was not entirely a success, and the former nomads continued the raids, which now had religious sanction and were bloodier than before. Unlike nomadic raiders, the Ikhwan earned notoriety for routinely killing male captives and for sometimes putting children and women to death. From 1914 to 1926, Ibn Saud and Wahhabi religious leadership allied with him urged the Ikhwan to not attack or harass other nomads and townspeople of the Najd. From 1926 and 1930, the conflict was more serious, and effectively a rebellion and attempt to overthrow Ibn Saud by a minority of the Ikhwan leaders. With the conquest of the Hejaz in 1925, Ibn Saud had completed his territorial expansion and negotiated border agreements with his neighbors, the British protectorates of Transjordan, Iraq, and Kuwait. Some Ikhwan leaders wanted to continue the expansion of the Wahhabi realm into these states, and launch trades into them. This left Ibn Saud responsible for military attacks originating in his country and facing British military power if he did not stop them. Differences with Ibn Saud. In general, the Ikhwan wished Ibn Saud to pursue strict Wahhabi policies, while Ibn Saud sought more flexibility to adapt policy to local circumstances and maintain political stability, especially in newly conquered lands that had few Wahhabi believers. Wahhabis supported forced conversion of Shia Sharia in Al-Hassa, while Ibn Saud was willing to tolerate the practices. After conquest of the two holy cities of Mecca and Medina, which had been part of the Ottoman Empire for 4 centuries and developed a pluralistic religious culture, Ibn Saud sought to reassure the Muslim world that a new Wahhabi regime would not disrupt the pilgrimage, while the Ikhwan pressed for strict adherence to Wahhabi norms, such as forbidding smoking tobacco and worshipping at shrines. In 1926 meeting of Ikhwan leaders at Al-Atawiyah found Ibn Saud at fault for not upholding the sharp separation of belief and infidelity. Among his misdeeds were allowing 2 of his sons to travel to idolatrous lands, allowing idolatrous nomads from Iraq and Transjordan to pasture their animals in the abode of Islam, leniency towards Shiites, the introduction of modern inventions, and illegal taxation of nomadic tribes. Ibn Saud attempted to mollify the Ikhwan by submitting their accusations to the religious scholars, who agreed on the need for more strict policies towards non-Wahhabi subjects, but also affirmed that only the ruler had the right to declare jihad. Weaponry and combat style. The Ikhwan, being irregular tribesmen, relied mainly on traditional weapons such as lances and swords and sometimes old-fashioned firearms. Usually, they attacked in the forms of raids, which is a style Bedouins had always used in the deserts of Arabia. Those raiders traveled mainly on camels and some horses. Typically, every male captured was put to death by cutting his throat. Raids on Transjordan. 2 notable raids on Emirate of Transjordan, a British protectorate, occurred in 1922 and 1924. In August 1922, some 1,500 Ikhwan camel-mounted fighters led by Eqab bin Mohaya attacked Transjordan. According to one account, they retreated before they reached their objective, the capital Amman. According to another account, they massacred the inhabitants of 2 small villages before being decimated by British armored cars and planes. In August 1924, another larger Ikhwan force, numbering some 4,500 raiders, traveled 1,600 kilometers from Najd to come within 15 kilometers of Amman before being spotted and attacked by British RAF aircraft. The Ikhwan army reportedly suffered 500 dead. Without the help of the RAF, Amman would most likely been captured by the Ikhwan. Revolt and defeat. In 1927, tribesmen of the Mutayir and Ajman rebelled against the ulama's judgment and the authority of Ibn Saud and engaged in cross-border raids into parts of Transjordan, Iraq and Kuwait. The destruction of an Iraqi police post provoked an international incident by violating the Saudi-Iraqi neutral zone between Iraq and Arabia, established by Great Britain and Ibn Saud. The British bombed Najd in retaliation. A congress convened by Ibn Saud in October 1928 deposed Ibn Humayd at-Dorsh and Ibn Hidlain, the leaders of the revolt. The Ikhwanis also raided Kuwait in January 1928. With the Ikhwan leadership defiant, Abdulaziz took to the field to lead his army, which was now supported by 4 British aircraft and a fleet of 200 military vehicles that symbolized the modernization that the Ikhwan abhorred. After suffering a major defeat at the Battle of Sabia, the main body of Ikhwan surrendered to British forces on the Saudi-Kuwaiti frontier in January 1930. Ibn Saud completed the military defeat of the Ikhwan rebels with a deft mix of punishment and rehabilitation to avoid antagonizing the bulk of Ikhwan, who had agreed with many of the rebels' complaints but remained on the sidelines. Rebel leaders Duish and Ibn Bujad died in captivity in Riyadh. Quote, Their tribal followers were punished with the confiscation of the lion's share of the camels and horses. The remnants of the irregular Ikhwanis formed units in Ibn Saud's new military institution, initially known as the White Army, later called the National Guard. 1979 had mosque seizure. Insurgents who participated in the 1979 had mosque seizure in Mecca referred to themselves as the Al-Ikhwan. They were led by Jew Hayman al-Otaibi. Although the same tribe as Sultan Ibn Bajad, they are not related.